You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no schedule, no place you need to be. For most of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. It was every single night. Here's the number that should stop you. When researchers finally measured sleep in people with zero access to electric light, they found something almost nobody expected. They didn't sleep more than we do. They slept less, and they almost never napped. Let's back up. For decades, the story about ancient sleep was simple, and it was wrong. The idea went like this. Before electricity, humans slept 10 or 12 hours a night, drifting peacefully with the sun, untouched by the stress and screens that wreck our rest today. It's a comforting story. It's also not what the evidence shows. In 2015, a team led by Gandhi Yetish, working with UCLA sleep researcher Jerome Siegel and Harvard's Charles Czeisler, published a study in the journal Current Biology. They didn't guess about ancient sleep. They measured it, directly, in 3 communities living without electricity or clocks: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. Each participant wore a small wrist device that tracked movement and light exposure, day and night, for weeks. The results surprised the researchers themselves. Average sleep across all 3 groups came out to about 6.5 hours a night. Not 8, not 10, 6.5. Sit with that for a second. Are we the exception, or were they? The study also found something else. These groups didn't fall asleep at sunset. They stayed active for hours after dark, often gathered around a fire, talking, before finally lying down. Sleep onset came a few hours after sunset, and they woke consistently before sunrise, without any alarm at all. Their bodies simply knew. This points to something researchers call the circadian rhythm, an internal clock, roughly 24 hours long, that runs on temperature and light rather than on a schedule pinned to a wall. In these communities, nighttime cooling was the real signal. Temperature dropped, and sleep followed close behind, almost like clockwork, but a clock built from weather rather than numbers. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who studies what she calls sleep ecology, the way environment and social life shape rest across different cultures, has spent decades pointing out that the 8-hour, silent, solo bedroom is itself a strange historical outlier. Across most documented small-scale societies she has studied, sleep tends to happen in shared space, in shorter and more flexible stretches, and around an active fire rather than behind a closed door. The bedroom, in other words, is not the ancient default. It's closer to a recent invention. There's another layer to this that most people never think about. Was anyone actually asleep at the same time? Anthropologist David Sampson, who has spent years running actigraphy studies directly in Hadza camps, found something remarkable when he tracked overnight wakefulness across multiple sleeping individuals at once. At almost any given moment in the night, someone in the group was awake. Not everyone, just someone. As individuals drifted in and out of light sleep at slightly different times, the group as a whole maintained something close to constant, low-level vigilance, without anyone ever being assigned to a watch shift. Researchers are still working out how deliberate this pattern actually is, versus how much of it simply falls out of natural variation in individual sleep timing. But the effect is the same either way. A sleeping group, even with no single guard posted, was rarely fully unconscious all at once. So, if this is a small window into a piece of ancestral biology, and it survived over tens of thousands of years, what would a single night have actually looked like? Picture the end of a day for a small foraging band, sometime in the deep past. The light is going orange and low. People are drifting back toward a shared fire. There's no debate about bedtime, because there's no bedtime to debate. People eat, people talk. Someone tells a story that gets embellished a little more each time it's told. This is the detail that gets me every time. Researchers studying the Jew, Hoanzi, and related groups have noted that firelight conversation in the evening often turns towards storytelling, gossip, and social repair, rather than the practical talk of daytime hours. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner examined exactly this pattern in her fieldwork with Jew, Hoanzi communities, comparing daytime and nighttime conversation topics. She found that stories told after dark carried more social and imaginative weight, the kind of talk that builds trust and shared history inside a group. In other words, Firelight wasn't just light. It may have been one of the original social technologies, a shared, unhurried space that daylight, full of chores and predators and heat, simply didn't allow. Eventually, one by one, people lie down. Not all at once, not on command. There's no single moment where the whole group goes dark together. Some curl close to the embers, where the ground still holds a little warmth. Children are often near an adult, not tucked away alone in another room, because there is no other room. A dog, if the camp has one, might settle across someone's feet. Somewhere in the dark, someone shifts, coughs, gets up briefly to check the fire, and lies back down. Nobody records the time. Nobody needs to. By the coldest hour before dawn, the fire has burned down to almost nothing, and this, according to the Yiddish data, is often when body temperature and sleep depth are at their lowest point of the whole night. Then the sky starts to change color at the horizon, slowly, and something in the body responds before the eyes even fully open. And that detail leads somewhere unexpected. Historian A. Roger Akirch spent years combing through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, work he published in his book At Day's Close. He found repeated, casual references to a first sleep and a second sleep, two separate blocks of rest with a quiet waking period in between, sometimes an hour or more, used for prayer, conversation, sex, or simply lying in the dark with your thoughts. This isn't a story about the deep ice age. It's about villages a few hundred years ago, before gas lighting reshaped the night. But it raises a real question researchers are still split on. Was segmented sleep an old evolved pattern going back much further, or a more recent cultural habit shaped by long, dark, candlelit nights in colder climates? The honest answer is we don't have skeletal or genetic evidence that settles it either way. What we do have is strong historical documentation that consolidated, unbroken 8-hour sleep, the kind treated today as the only normal option, is a surprisingly modern invention. Interestingly, the Yiddish study found almost no segmented sleep and almost no napping in the Hadza, San, or Tsimane, which complicates any tidy story. Naps did show up occasionally, mostly during the hottest, most oppressive part of the day, when working outdoors made little sense anyway. But nighttime itself was typically one continuous block, not two. This is worth pausing on, because it's exactly the kind of detail that wellness culture tends to flatten. You've probably seen the claim online that humans are naturally wired for 2 sleeps, or that a single unbroken night is unnatural and modern. The real picture is messier and more interesting than either extreme. Segmented sleep shows up clearly in one detailed historical record, from a specific place and time. Continuous, single-block sleep shows up clearly in 3 present-day foraging and farming communities living without artificial light. Both are real. Neither one is the one true ancestral pattern for our entire species, and anyone telling you otherwise is oversimplifying research that is genuinely still being worked out. Which brings us to the twist most people don't expect. Artificial light didn't just let us stay up later. It may have quietly reshaped what we believe a normal night is even supposed to look like. Jerome Siegel and his colleagues argue that industrial lighting compressed sleep into one solid block and pushed bedtimes later, while nighttime temperature cues, the kind that used to nudge foraging communities toward rest, got drowned out by heated homes and glowing screens. The Hadza and San in the Yiddish study weren't struggling with insomnia. They rarely reported trouble falling asleep at all, despite sleeping less than the modern recommended 8 hours. Their bodies weren't broken. Their environment simply gave clearer signals. To be clear, this is not a claim that your ancestors had perfect sleep or that modern insomnia is imaginary. Sleep researchers still debate how much of this pattern generalizes across all pre-industrial societies, since these are only 3 communities, in specific climates, studied at one point in time. The Hadza, San, and Tsimane are contemporary people living full modern lives today, not a frozen window into the Paleolithic. Their sleep is a useful clue about biology under low, light conditions, not a script for exactly how a Pleistocene hunter-gatherer slept 40,000 years ago. Still, the pattern is consistent enough to matter. Darkness used to be dark. Cooling used to be a signal, not something canceled out by a thermostat. And bedtime used to be a feeling in the body, not a number on a phone. Charles Chisler's earlier work at Harvard, going back to the 1980s and 1990s, established something that still holds up today. Even modest exposure to bright light in the evening can suppress the release of melatonin, the hormone that helps signal to the brain that night has arrived. A candle or a low fire produces almost none of this effect. A bright screen, held 12 inches from your face for an hour before bed, produces quite a lot of it. None of this means your ancestors had it easy, or that a hard mattress and a hot fire beat a quiet bedroom. Illness, cold, predators, and hunger all interrupted ancient sleep in ways a modern bedroom never has to worry about. This isn't a story about a lost paradise. It's a story about signals. For most of the time humans have existed, darkness meant darkness, coolness meant nighttime, and firelight was the closest thing to a screen anyone had, dim and warm and nothing like the light pouring out of a phone at midnight. So here's the mirror. Right now, most people fall asleep later than their bodies actually want to, kept awake by light that never existed in this form until extremely recently, checking a screen that keeps their internal clock guessing about whether it's actually night. This isn't medical advice, and it isn't a call to throw out your alarm clock. It's just a fact worth sitting with. For the overwhelming majority of the time, our species has existed. Nobody needed one. There's a strange kind of guilt a lot of people carry about sleep today, the sense that lying awake at 3 a.m. means something is broken in you. The Hadza and sand data don't erase that experience, and they're not a cure for it. But they do suggest something gentler. Waking briefly in the night, drifting, and falling back asleep may be closer to an old, ordinary rhythm than a malfunction. What changed isn't necessarily your body. It's the room around it, the light inside it, and the number glowing on the device next to your head, quietly insisting that anything other than one smooth 8-hour block is a failure. Researchers like Siegel are careful to say this isn't a license to ignore real, persistent insomnia, which is a genuine medical concern worth raising with a doctor, not a return to some imagined natural state. But for the ordinary, occasional 3 a.m. wake-up that most people quietly panic about, the deeper history offers a smaller, calmer thought. Your ancestors probably knew this hour too, wide awake by the last coals of a fire, listening to the dark, waiting for their body to decide it was time again. You wake up when your body is ready. For most of human history, that wasn't a lucky exception. It was simply how the night worked.